Look, guys, I was sitting here kind of thinking about everything that you just heard, right? Also partially because I think you're sitting here thinking, oh yeah, the guy's gonna have, like, in the last town hall, a massive announcement. That's a complete waste of fucking time right now. I'm telling you how it is with what the market is experiencing right now. We actually tried it last week with the X402 stuff, you know, together with the Coinbase developer portal and like agentic payments, AI, everybody's talking about it. Fuck all. Everybody's just sitting on their fingers right now. Everybody's sitting in stables, just waiting on what's going to happen. And I think it's quite important in order to put a little, like, my viewpoint of this, right? I think what we've seen makes, from a macro perspective, no sense. The only indicator that hit was this stupid 4-year cycle crap, right? And that kind of was the only one that kind of hit on time. What I'm trying to say here is, if you want to boil down, because you hear Concordium ID app, you hear PayFi, you hear verify and pay, verify and access. I think the verification piece is the most important puzzle piece. I have been in this industry for a long time, right? And what it ultimately came down to, I'm getting messages here right now. We need to start with the Q&A. This is a very important message that I just want to put out. I'm going to start the Q&A. Give me a second. One of the core things that is missing in this industry is users. Everybody's sitting there and is talking about user adoption in the real world, day to day. How are you getting this in? But ask yourself this. Go and ask your auntie. Go and ask your mummy. Go and ask your sister. Go and ask anybody who maybe you know is not in this industry. And what I mean there is this wonderful word from Web 2 to Web 3. And what I'm trying to say here is, as long as you kind of go down the route of having to explain to somebody what a mnemonic seed phrase is, and like public addresses and private keys with you know, alphanumerical strings, and if you lose the 24 words, you're gone and your money is gone. Like, nobody's going to use this stuff. Like, that is a fact, right? So ultimately what it comes down to is that you need to find a way of, number one, a project that kind of solves for user adoption in a way where you don't try to ram down people's throat the idea of money Lego and yield farming down some DeFi pool because it has been existing now for 4 years and the market cap is high. You're not going to get users on. The average dApp users over the course of the last 4 years has stayed stagnant. There are no new people in there. That's the important thing. Everybody's talking about tokenization, and that makes a lot of sense. But only if you're able to integrate it to your existing brokerage accounts, which means the banks need to be there, right? So what I'm trying to say here is, when you think of Concordium and you hear all those words, it ultimately comes down to the fact of bringing users into an ecosystem without them knowing that they're now suddenly in a blockchain world. That's what the game is. The game is, what you then can do is that you can basically come down the road and say, if you are, and this is where we say thank you to the partners that we have, because they have that foresight. If you think of Bitcoin.com, if you think of Ledger, they're going to go like, well, I don't know where the growth is going to come from. Great, Bitcoin can maybe double, can maybe 10, like if you think of Jack Marlow or whoever, like Kathy Wood said yesterday, just 5 minutes ago, she basically came out and said like, oh, it's going to be a mega cycle and it's going to be, we're back on the 2 million track. Come on, man. Like, I'm getting very bored about this, very bored. It ultimately comes down to the fact of how can you give something to an everyday user and bring him into a world that he's not aware of changing his existing habits. Because if you would rock up and you try to ask him that if he bought some Apple shares on a brokerage account, or if he paid for a coffee at Starbucks, and you ask him of the process that happens behind the scenes, he has no bloody clue of how it works. That's the fact. If you now overlay the complexities of blockchain to it, you will not get user adoption. That's just a fact, right? So those partners that are bringing that in, you can then start to cross-sell, upsell, and basically enable Bitcoin.com and enable Ledger in order to become a player where they can use the devices in everyday interactions to pay for stuff, as simple as, right? And which is where we did what we did, right? And also, like, big announcements right now where there is this uncertainty and everybody is scared of the big bad bear, which in my opinion is, by the way, total bullshit. This is going to bounce back, and it's going to bounce back hard. And there are a lot of opinions of why not. We can talk into dollar liquidity, and we can talk about, you know, the reverse repos having been drained, and like all this stuff that you can listen about hours on If you switch on Bloomberg, even though they're very, the press is very, very good at, once it's a little bit down, everybody jumps on the thing. It's over. Absolute bollocks. And ultimately, for me and for us, it is important that we kind of figure out, in order to become a foundation that is not just hemorrhaging money, right? If you go down the route of, like, if there are some hardcore crypto guys in this town hall right now, they might be very happy and say, like, well, this is not true because I'm making 40% of my yield farming down some. Yeah, if you would actually know of how this is being done, how it's being subsidized, there is a reason why the valuations roughly stay the same. I'm going to call out Solana on this front, quite frankly, right? It's a great project, no Anatoly, from early days, right? But ultimately it came down to the fact, look at what happened. It was 70 billion valuation at $200, nearly $300. It's 70 billion valuation at $130. Like, what do you think the next thing is going to be? What I'm trying to get to at is here, if we really want to move forward as an industry, we need to kind of step away from the thought process of trying to do the DeFi crypto native stuff. That's a very finite resource, and it's going to take far longer than you actually want it to be if you are believing in the idea of DLT, in the idea of blockchain technology to be applied into everyday life. And then all the wonderful things that we built, by the way, suddenly start to make sense, right? And that we're doubling down on. The locking mechanisms, right? I'm a massive believer that the time value of money, if I think of a rental agreement, why the hell would I need to send somebody cash that sits in a bank account for 3 years that I'm not getting paid on any yield, in theory, right? That I'm not getting paid on in any shape or form. And subsequently, 2 years later, and it's done in a currency that does nothing else but depreciate in value, which is why the crypto industry exists in the first place. And if you kind of puzzle those things together, if you hear dApp, if you hear verify and pay, if you hear verify and access, right? We're not talking, when we talk about verify and access, there is no stable coin involved. It's literally just you interacting in a digital world in a fully privacy preserving way. Something that Varun didn't mention is the fact that if you go and search on CoinGecko or wherever, we're listed under the privacy side of things, top 5, but done in the correct way, not anonymity. I don't think that's not going to fly from a regulatory perspective. Privacy, however, as long as you stay compliant, that flies, which is the reason why we got, the nods and the thumbs up from regulators to get like, please go ahead. So I just wanted to quickly say this. I just wanted to kind of round this off because number one, I'm extremely proud of the entire team. The guys here, everybody, not just these guys that you see here. Everybody has been working fucking 16, 20-hour days in order to make sure that we get something out in a very short time, and all the stuff that is not announced yet. Because right now announcing stuff is like you shooting yourself in the kneecap. Makes no sense, right? So ultimately, what I'm trying to say here is also a massive thank you to everybody. Not only, and it's also down to the community now, right? Because I'm getting the messages of like, oh my God, the price is down. Like, honestly, like, do your research, look at all the projects, figure out what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And yeah, look, I'm always getting very, very, emotional about those things because it just doesn't make sense to me that we still try to beat this dead horse of like going, you can draw a mortgage next year from a DeFi pool. It's just not happening. So I just wanted to say this out loud.